Hello friends, we are glad to be together here because today will be our last lecture of the year, and in 2019 of course. Next year we'll have everything again. I like to point that this is a milestone for us, because we have been meeting, acquiring knowledge, learning together, but mostly, more than a milestone of knowledge and understanding of Spiritism, is these loving bonds that we are strengthening among us during every week, each week of the year. So for that, I can only be thankful to God for being here today. So our topic today, as you can see, is about passions, and I will try to bring some reflections on this book of Cosme Massi, The Spirits and the Men, chiefly on the dialogue 2 of the book, because the book is divided in dialogues, not chapters. And it's not in English yet, but will be. Okay, so let's begin. I would like to begin bringing to reflection two precepts by the Spirit of Truth. These ones: Spiritists, love one another. That's the first precept. Educate yourselves is the second. So Spiritism points out a north for us to achieve, okay? But it also shows us that our human trials are educational tools for us to that enable us to free ourselves from the bad passions, okay? Bad passions that hold back our evolution. So in our weekly studies here at Paul of Tarsus, these discussions about our need to develop ourselves in intellect and in moral, those are a commonplace for us. Essential discussions, by the way, because we know, we learned that we are immortal spirits, who still have a lot to learn, and a long way to get rid of all the lowly sentiments, the evil desires that are pertinent to our position in the spiritual rank. Okay? So, talking about spiritual rank, spiritual hierarchy, I borrowed a figure from another book by Cosme Massi, the book Spirit and Matter, and this one is already in English, as you know. And this figure, in this figure we can see very clearly that Kardec, for didactical purposes, he either classified the spirits into classes, the dark green circles, superior spirits or elevated spirits, and inferior spirits, or three orders: the pure spirits, first order; second order, good spirits; and the third, imperfect spirits, the third order. Well, as you know, we fit here: imperfect spirits, okay, or inferior spirits. Just to remind ourselves, we all know that. So, in the Spirit's book, we also learn, Kardec also brings to us the general features of the spirits in each of those classifications. And I brought just some highlights for us to work on our reflections today. The first order, the pure spirits, matter has no influence over these spirits. The second order, the good ones, the good spirits, not the good ones, because it's a name. The good spirits is the name of the spirits. It's a title, let's say. These spirits prevail over matter, and they desire goodness, they desire excellence. And the third order, imperfect spirits, matter has a predominant influence over us, imperfect spirits. The spirit has a propensity to do wrong and is marked by ignorance, pride, selfishness, and all the related vile passions. And here is our focal point tonight, okay? The bad passions, the vile passions. And as we always do, we begin by understanding the word in the context that we are discussing today. So, this word, passion, etymological, has its roots stemming in Latin, okay? And among other meanings that throughout time develop for this word, it also developed this sense of receiving the action passively, or the contrary of action, okay? And early on it also developed an extended sense of a very powerful feeling, for example, of sexual attraction, love, hate, anger, or other emotion. And this we can see in the dictionaries. And to put it simply for us, passion is what we feel when someone hits us, when someone steps on our foot, or that thing that invades our guts when our team here in Canada, our hockey team, loses the match at the final minute. We have that emotion, okay? This is passion. Okay. Or, common in Canada also, Adriano can tell us this, is what we feel when we encounter with a bear at our doorsteps. This is passion, okay? Also passion. So the classic meaning for passion tells us that passion is a sentiment independent of our will. And here is the meaning. Those meanings are the ones that interest us on our discussions, on our reflections on the dialogue 2 of this book, okay? And at this point of the book, it's still in dialogue 1 because it takes a part of dialogue 1, but chiefly we are discussing dialogue 2. At this point, Cosme Mansi gives this saying to this guy here, René Descartes. Okay. René Descartes is the French philosopher who, back there in the 17th century, in his notable work, The Passions of the Soul, he tells us that he needed to define passions in order to know them better. Okay? And he defines passions as those perceptions, those sensations or emotions of the soul which are caused, maintained, strengthened by the influence of the physical body. Okay? So, for René Descartes, passion is thus an emotion that stems from matter, is an effect in the soul that comes from a movement of the body. Okay? And Descartes, he identifies 6 primitive passions: love, hatred, joy and sadness, wonder and desire. But he also accepts an unlimited number of what he calls combinations of the primitive passions. Okay? So I put some of them here, not all, because it's an unlimited number. Okay? So we can see envy, jealous, dread, despair, hope, worship, indignation, repentance. All of those are combinations of the 6 primitive passions, according to René Descartes. And he also considers passions in their intensity, in their object, okay? So And he tells us this thing. He tells us that the passions, they seem to combine most readily by producing trains of passions. Okay? And he means that, for example, desire may give rise to love, and love in turn may generate joy. So one passion bringing the other, okay, in trains of passions. So again, the passion is caused and kept and sustained in the soul regardless of the soul's will. Okay. And why this happens? Descartes tells us there are subtle material elements in the body that he calls animal spirits. Today we would call biochemicals of our body. Okay? And those subtle material elements are the responsible for prompting in the passions in the soul. And this happens, it's possible that this happens because of the bonding of the soul with the body. So, in the 17th century, he came to this conclusion. So, that's why he says the soul can't avoid to feel a passion, an emotion. Okay? Should we despair because of this lack of direct control over our passions? We don't need. Okay? We don't need because we can indirectly control and even modify any passion with our thought, with our will. And if you are trying to classify those passions in this slide, oh, this is good, this is bad, oh, this is bad, this is good, let's stop here. And first, let's hear what Kardec and the spirits have to tell us about the passions. Okay? In the book Genesis, if we read, if one studies all passions and even all vices, one sees that they have their origin in the instinct of self-preservation. All passions have thus their providential utility. It's only abuse which constitutes the evil, and man abuses by virtue of his free will. So also, in the Spirit's book, when Kardec asks the spirits, how can we define the limit at which passions cease to be good or bad? Their answer is, passions are like a horse that is positive or useful when under control, but dangerous when untamed. A passion becomes weak the moment you lose control of it, and when it causes harm to yourself or the others. Okay? So, according to these texts, according to these two texts, from the moral point of view, a passion is neutral. No passion is good or bad in essence. So it is okay. It is okay because it's natural for us to emotionally react to situations. What is not okay is to lose our control over the emotions that we feel. So one passion only becomes a bad passion when we lose control over it. And as a result, we produce evil. Okay. So for instance, let's go back to the previous slide here. Take joy. Joy, if uncontrolled, makes us invigilant. Sadness, when controlled, puts us aware and search for solutions for the problem, for the difficulty we are facing. For example, we are sick, we become sad, we seek for treatment. Okay? So fear. Fear in excess freezes us, forbids us to act. But fear controlled is what protects us, is our protection. So, now let's continue. But now we have arrived to a delicate situation involving passions, when the passion is the result of an aggression that we suffer from another human being. Okay? That's the most difficult situation. So, and in this dialogue too that we are reflecting upon, one of the characters asks this question, can we control the flare-up of rage and hatred when facing aggression? Can we avoid that emotion of rage and hatred to manifest itself in our soul? Okay. So the author, Cosmo Massi, gives us a very straightforward answer, and he says, it depends. It depends on what kind of order of spirit you belong to. Are you from the first order? Second? Third? Okay? And so I try to make a summary of what he tells us there. And he says, incarnating perfect spirits, all of us here. I don't think we have any good spirit here yet. Well, we can't avoid, because the passions are the natural response of the influences of the physical body upon the soul. We can't stop feeling those evil passions of hatred and rage against the aggressor, because in our case, in perfect spirits, what happens? Matter prevails over the spirit. Okay? We can only control indirectly. And we can do that by using the resources of our imagination, of reasoning, and control for us is good already. Because when we control our passions, we avoid the detrimental actions that result from the uncontrolled emotion that would be harmful to us or to the others. Okay? So, however, in the case of the incarnate good spirits, who are very rare among us, they do not even feel those bad passions of rage and hatred against the aggressor. Even if they are injured in the worst way, their feeling of love toward any other spirit remains unchanged. Okay? They always return goodness for evil. Like Jesus said, return goodness for evil. And Jesus even added, do not resist the evil that they wish to do to you. If someone shall smite thee in thy cheek, present him the other also. So the good spirits can follow this moral precept perfectly. We do not, for now, presently, just. And here we have another important distinction to make. A very important distinction to make between the aversion to the harm that results from the aggression and the hatred towards the offender, the abuser, the aggressor. You choose. Okay? Those are distinct entities. The first reaction, this feeling of aversion, of repugnance and sadness that we feel, those are natural consequences of the pain and the physical damage that we may have suffered. So it relates to the conservation of the body, and it is what takes us to seek treatment, to seek protection, and also to disapprove the bad behavior. of the aggressor. Okay? This first reaction, even the good spirits, when they are incarnated, they feel, because it relates to a preservation of the body, and they have a body to preserve also. Okay? It's nature. However, the second reaction, which is the feeling of rage and hatred for the aggressor, on the other hand, this is not related to protection of life. This is related to the interaction between souls. It's relation from soul to soul. It's different. However, we make this association. We make this association with the resulting pain after an aggression and the hatred for the aggressor. And this is a habit that we develop in our human journey. Okay? But as any other habit, it can be changed, it can be altered through education and our efforts with our will. Okay? However, we can observe ourselves that despite being imperfect spirits, we can sometimes not feel hatred for the offender. Okay? When we suffer the pain of an insult, even a moral insult. I was thinking about this today. Or when we are harmed by any physical aggression. Because when we suffer a moral aggression, it always sometimes leads us to develop diseases that can be harmful to our body too. So I was trying to see that this connection is much more ample, not only when we suffer a physical aggression. So, but how? How can we change this habit that we have with us for so long? Okay? This is a practical question. This is a practical question, and it's there in the dialogue too. How to control the passions? How can we suffer a hard and unjust aggression and not feel hatred for the aggressor? How can we? Okay? Let's ask the help of our doctrine. In the question 911, Kardec asks the spirits, are the passions sometimes so fierce and irresistible that the will is powerless to stand them? Their answer, oh, many people say I want to, but their will is only on their lips. They are not genuinely sorry when what they want does not happen. When people are unable to conquer their passions, it is because they take pleasure in yielding to them. Those who can control their passions understand their spiritual nature and know that every victory over them is a triumph of the spirit over matter. So we hear here that we read here that we need this firm will to master the passions. Okay, a will that turns into action, not just a desire that is just a project or a good intention that may or may not happen and or become a reality. Okay? I don't have this firm will, do you? All the time? Okay. When shall we have this firm will? Because in my case, I can tell by myself, I need it now. Just now. I need it now to control this fear that paralyzes even my speech sometimes. The anger that makes us sick. Or the sadness that prevents us to enjoy the love that is around us. And many other examples we could bring here today. In their answer, the spirits told us that a strong will to overcome the passions happens only when we do not find pleasure in the passions. And my question now is, do we already, in all cases, do we already, despite we need this firm will right now, okay? Okay, there is another question in the Spirit's book where the Spirit Paul of Tarsus, it's signed Paul the Apostle, the question 1009, when he is explaining the meaning of punishment in Spiritism. And in that question, he also recommended that we need to dislike our flaws, we need to dislike our imperfections. And he says this: what is punishment? Punishment is the natural consequence of that false movement of the soul. An amount of pain that is necessary to disgust the soul of its deformity by experiencing suffering. So, in our case, imperfect spirits, pain will necessarily come as a consequence of us still nurturing the bad passions and their consequent evil actions. Okay? It will come on earth or it will come in the spiritual realm. Okay? And yes, we know that time and pain can help us to lose that pleasure in the evil, that pleasure in the bad passions. But while it does not happen, our firm will won't happen either. Okay? And we will continue having only fleeting desires. Okay? And if we want to do so, if we want to change, we need to make efforts. To make efforts to control the evil passions, but also learning to replace them with the good passions. Okay? So, in this book, Cosme Massi tells us that what we can do in this case is making a shift in the linkage between the sensation of pain or any other perception and a certain specific passion in the soul, that we make this as a habit. Okay? But how can we do this? How can we make this shift in this linkage between the pain and the passion in the soul that we make as a habit? How can we? Okay? Well, here we come back to Descartes. Descartes have said that we have to use reason and thought. Okay? And he says that we can use reason and thought to change a habit that leads to a bad passion. Okay? And Descartes proposes an argumentative effort in order to break with the old connections between the aggression and the hatred for the aggressor. Okay? And that means that we need to create arguments in our mind that convince us that that passion is a bad thing for us. And Cosme Massi describes this argumentative process, effort, for us to understand it better in action in our own life. Okay? And he says that yes, we need to produce arguments right after the aggression, with the purpose of convincing ourselves that such rage or hatred must be fought or must be opposed. For example, we can think, the aggressor is an unhappy person. The aggression is the result of his unhappiness, or his littleness, or her littleness. The aggressor's rudeness also. Okay? Small-mindedness. So we have to produce arguments in our mind to convince us. Also, we have to produce arguments that tell us that with rage we will harm ourselves even more. Because besides the pain, we will feel the inside burning that rage causes in us. Produce arguments that tell us that rage puts ourselves in the same moral level as the aggressor. Also, that divine justice always happens, and if we feel rage, we will answer for that. Another argument. Think that rage is a passion that keeps us in the condition of an inferior spirit and postpones our progress. And we don't want that. We want to progress, okay? So with arguments of this kind, repeated times, okay, we can little by little transform the passion of rage and hatred to a reproach of the aggressor's behavior without hating the aggressor, though, okay? A disapproval of the behavior without hatred, okay? So it looks simple, isn't it? Very simple. No, it's not. It's not. It's not simple. Maybe it's simple to understand because Professor Cosme Mas is so didactical when he brings such dense subjects for our understanding in his books, but it's not easy. We know that. Because the practice of this argumentative process demands a lot of efforts, demands repetition, and time. Time, guys, time. We are always complaining that we don't have time, that we are always in a hurry, but this demands time. Could we speed up? As we are always in a hurry, could we speed up this process? Oh, I have a good news. He says that yes, we can speed up this process. And we can do that practicing. Practicing with the pains that come from other causes, that do not involve aggression or abuse from another human being. Okay, those natural pains and sufferings of life are excellent opportunities, he says, to practice this method of controlling and replacing the bad passions without being hurt by anybody else. We can practice to change our thoughts, our emotions, before the pain that results from diseases, from unpredictable difficulties of life. When we are angry of not having what we desire or what we fought for. When we are sad with ourselves, just like that. When we are angry with sickness. When we are facing a fear that is beyond good limit. In those natural situations, we can practice the controlling of passions, okay? For example, we all know that when we are sick, it's paramount that we work on our thoughts, on our feelings, besides going to the doctor. We all know that, never too much to remember, okay? And in that point of the dialogue too, of the reflection on the passions, the book brings us to this. Obedience is the consent of reason, and resignation is the consent of heart. Both are active forces, since they carry the burden which foolish revolt abandons. And the author tells us, reminds us that in most cases, in many cases, not in most, but in many cases, resignation is our best and only resort, okay? And yes, he says, it is as difficult, resignation is as difficult as not feeling hatred for the aggressor. And Spiritism can help us with that, as it brings explanations to support the consent, this consent of the heart that we read in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Okay? And because Spiritism tells us that while revolt brings sadness, rage, hatred, resignation brings peace and joy, even in the most challenging situations that we have, okay? So you won't get deep in this theme of resignation because it would be another lecture, but I would like to highlight that there are some misconceptions about resignation that relate resignation with a mix of laziness and renunciation, and that's not so in Spiritism. In Spiritism, Kardec and the high spirits, they consider resignation a virtue. And we can consider resignation a virtue in Spiritism because in Spiritism we depart from the certainty that we are immortal spirits in a process of evolution, in a universe created by a God that is supremely just and good. And because of that, we can only accept the difficulties of life, the suffering, with trust in God, with courage, even joy, and wonder at the wisdom of the divine laws that rule our lives. So the resigned ones know that the difficulties that they are passing are events and are results of their own life. They are passing events only. They also know that with resignation they can keep their balance, their spiritual balance, their emotional balance, and with that they can be open to the good influence of the good spirits. They are always here to help us in our difficult situations, to bring us strength, to bring us courage and hope. Okay? So that's why resignation is so important. And now I would come to the last point of our reflections. There is one last point that the author calls our attention. Because we can use reason to control the passions. Yes, we can. Use our thought, use our will. However, he says, we must not forget that passions belong to the field of the sentiments. And when they are too strong passions, we need something more directly linked to the sentiment. A kind of painkiller, okay, that can ease the intensity of the passion during the extreme difficulties and sufferings, okay? And in these cases, Spiritism has a help to offer to us, okay? However, Spiritism, with its help, must go beyond the other philosophical proposals that appeal only to reasoning, to imagination, to control the passions. Spiritism needs to go farther than René Descartes in its notable work, The Passions of the Soul. And Spiritism offers us, as the strongest painkiller, prayer. Prayer, which is a practical resource with a very immediate effect to help us to control the passions. Okay? And we read this for the ones who doubt. When Kardec asked the spirits, can human beings obtain effective help from the spirits in overcoming their passions? Their answer, well, yes. If they address a sincere prayer for such help to God, good spirits will help them as it is their duty to do so. We have a guardian angel with us 24/7 that has the duty to help us in our right requests through prayer. Okay? So let's make use of prayer. Let's make use of prayer, which is so efficient in controlling the passions, and also is so efficient in times that we need resignation. A prayer that is to be done regularly because passions need repetition and time, so we can conquer them. A prayer that in Spiritism is not reduced to a religious ritual, no, because in Spiritism we can justify prayer on the basis of the Spiritist science and the Spiritist philosophy. Okay? From the scientific point of view, very briefly, we have the magnetic action of the spirits over the fluids, upon the fluids. And from the philosophical stand in Spiritism, we know the fact that there is no fatality in the events of our moral life. No fatality in moral life. And because of that, and also because of a natural law of freedom, which must be respected, we need to ask in prayer if we want the high spirit's interference in our life, in the situations that we need. So, and here I end our reflections with a very meaningful and at the same time very beautiful thought by St. Augustine that we can read in the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is this: prayer is the divine dew which lessens the excessive heat of our passions. Beautiful, isn't it? So take up your burden and you feel sweet emotions which will pass through your soul even though you bear the weight of some infamous cross. So thank you for putting up with me. God bless us all. I would like to say some special thanks to Professor Cosme Massi that brings us books like this one here, okay? And to IDEAC, to Kardecpedia, that makes our studies in Spiritism so much easier, so more complete. Okay? So thank you.
Thank you.